Jealousy is cruel as the grave. And he was a man that lived on jealousy for 70 years. And he suffers from that desperately. And people call him old and querulous and whatever.
Anthony Quinn. The world knew him as Zorba the Greek, a powerhouse actor who could command any screen. He was a legend, a two-time Oscar winner, a true giant of Hollywood's golden age. But let's start with the title of this video. Did Anthony Quinn really have a hate list he named before he died? The short answer is no. That's the stuff of Hollywood legend. But the stories behind his most explosive and difficult rivalries? Those are all too real. These weren't just on-set squabbles. They were bitter clashes of ego and artistic differences that defined his career. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on the 5 biggest rivalries that shaped his turbulent life, the battles that pushed him to his limits, and the conflicts he carried with him for years. Anthony Quinn was more than an actor. He was a force of nature. Born Antonio Rodolfo Quinn Oaxaca in Chihuahua, Mexico in 1915, his life began right in the middle of the Mexican Revolution. His family story claims his Irish-Mexican father rode with the revolutionary Pancho Villa. From these fiery beginnings, his family made their way to America, where Quinn forged a life with fierce determination. He worked as a boxer, a street preacher, and even briefly studied with the great architect Frank Lloyd Wright, who saw his unique charisma and urged him to become an actor. That raw, worldly experience was both his greatest gift and his biggest hurdle in Hollywood. He wasn't the polished all-American leading man studios were looking for. As he often put it, he was too Mexican or too unusual looking. This made him a perpetual outsider, a man who had to fight for every ounce of respect. For years, he was typecast as gangsters, Native American chiefs, and ethnic villains, simmering under a system that wouldn't see him as anything more. But you couldn't contain that kind of talent. He was a volcanic presence, an actor with an elemental power that brought a gritty realism to every role. That intensity, though, often led to conflict. He was described as volatile and unpredictable, a performer who made it hard as hell for everyone around him because he didn't just play his parts, he lived them. The story of Anthony Quinn isn't just about the roles he played, it's about the battles he fought. And his first great rival wasn't an actor at all. It was the entire Hollywood machine, personified by one of its most feared tyrants. Long before Anthony Quinn ever clashed with another actor, he was locked in a bitter war with an even bigger opponent, the Hollywood studio system. And for Quinn, the face of that system was Harry Cohn, the tyrannical head of Columbia Pictures. Their conflict wasn't about a single argument. It was a clash of worldviews. In Hollywood's golden age, studios owned their actors. They were property, signed to long-term contracts that controlled their roles, their image, and even their personal lives. For a man like Quinn, who was fiercely individualistic and proud of his Mexican heritage, this was a prison. He felt the sting of discrimination from day one. The message was clear. He was too dark or too Mexican, and the great parts always went to actors who fit a more conventional mold. Harry Cohn was the ultimate studio boss, a crude, intimidating figure who ruled Columbia with an iron fist and was notorious for his contempt for actors. For years, Quinn was trapped, playing an endless string of stereotypes. The Indian warrior, the Oriental villain, the Arab prince. The roles paid the bills, but they starved his artistic soul. The tension wasn't just professional, it was personal. Quinn's first marriage was to Catherine DeMille, the adopted daughter of the legendary director Cecil B. DeMille. But even being Hollywood royalty adjacent didn't help. His own father-in-law kept him at arm's length, making Quinn feel like he'd never be fully accepted because of his background. This feeling of being an outsider fueled his resentment toward power brokers like Cohn. His escape was a declaration of independence. Fed up, he left Hollywood for New York in 1947 to prove himself on Broadway. It was a huge gamble that paid off. On stage, he tackled complex characters, free from Hollywood's narrow-minded casting. When he returned to Hollywood, it was on his own terms. He was no longer just a contract player, he was a Broadway star. His war against the system came to a head with his role as Eufemio Zapata in Viva Zapata in 1952. It won him his first Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor. It was the ultimate vindication. He hadn't just survived the studio system, he had beaten it. His struggle against the machine, personified by men like Cohn, was the crucible that forged the fiercely independent artist he would become. If his fight with the studio system was a war of attrition, Anthony Quinn's rivalry with Marlon Brando was a head-to-head clash of titans. The battleground was a single iconic film, 1952's Viva Zapata. This wasn't just a spat between co-stars, it was a rivalry that would come to a dramatic conclusion on Oscar night. By the early 50s, Marlon Brando was a phenomenon. He was the face of a new kind of acting, raw, intuitive, and rebellious. He was the method, and he was changing the game. Quinn, on the other hand, was the veteran who had clawed his way up and infused his roles with a power born from real-life experience. When director Elia Kazan started casting Viva Zapata, Quinn, whose own family story connected him to the Mexican Revolution, felt the lead role of Emiliano Zapata was his birthright. But Kazan and the studio wanted the magnetic rising star, Marlon Brando. To add insult to injury, Brando, a white actor from Nebraska, got the lead, while Quinn, a Mexican-born actor, was offered the supporting role of Zapata's brother, Eufemio. The tension was immediate. On set, their different acting styles were a constant source of friction. Brando was famous for his lack of conventional preparation, often using cue cards hidden around the set. Quinn, meanwhile, arrived bursting with ideas from his own heritage, only to find them repeatedly dismissed by Kazan, who was laser-focused on his star. Their on-screen dynamic crackled because their off-screen rivalry was real. As Eufemio, Quinn is a force of nature, all coiled intensity. Brando's Emiliano is more introspective and conflicted. Quinn wasn't just playing a character who felt overshadowed by his brother. He was an actor who felt overshadowed by his co-star. He channeled all that frustration and ambition into his performance. The climax of their rivalry came at the Academy Awards. Both men were nominated. Brando was the favorite for Best Actor, but lost. When the award for Best Supporting Actor was announced, it was Anthony Quinn's name they called. It was a stunning moment. He had taken the secondary role and triumphed, becoming the first Mexican-born actor to win an Oscar. While it was more of a profound professional rivalry than a lifelong feud, it was a clash of two powerful egos. On Oscar night, Quinn stepped out of Brando's shadow and proved he was no one's supporting player. The rivalry between Anthony Quinn and Sir Laurence Olivier wasn't about shouting matches. It was quieter, deeper, and maybe more interesting. It was a clash of acting dynasties. On one side, you had Olivier, the titan of the British stage, the master of Shakespeare, the embodiment of classical technical perfection. On the other, you had Quinn, the raw elemental force from the streets, whose power came from pure instinct. They met on the 1960 Broadway production of Becket, playing the two leads, King Henry II and Thomas Becket. In a fascinating bit of theatrical sport, they even switched roles during the run, each man testing his skills in the other's part. Behind the scenes, the atmosphere was one of intense, unspoken competition. Olivier built his characters from the outside in, perfecting every gesture. Quinn worked from the inside out, drawing on a well of raw emotion. Olivier reportedly found Quinn's untamed style unpredictable. Quinn, in turn, was wary of the formal, intellectual approach Olivier represented. Each man was determined to prove his own method was the right one. This dynamic carried over to the set of the 1968 film The Shoes of the Fisherman, where Quinn played a Russian pope and Olivier played the Soviet. Premiere. They were two lions sharing a cage, each keenly aware of the other's power. Quinn had a favorite story that perfectly captured this kind of subtle warfare. Another famous actor once accused him of stealing a scene from behind. The director, frustrated, told Quinn to just sit in a chair and do nothing. The next day, the star was still furious. "Look at him!" he yelled. The director protested, "He's just sitting there." The actor shot back, "Maybe so, but he's thinking." That was the essence of his rivalry with Olivier. It was a quiet, dignified war between two masters, each trying to outthink the other. These stories are just a peek into the hidden world of old Hollywood, a time of massive egos and legendary conflicts. If you love discovering the drama that happened after the cameras stopped rolling, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. We have plenty more secrets to uncover, and you won't want to miss a single one. The setting was the vast, unforgiving Jordanian desert. The film was Lawrence of Arabia. And the conflict, as the legend goes, was between two men who couldn't have been more different: Anthony Quinn, the established Hollywood powerhouse, and Peter O'Toole, the lanky, then unknown Irish actor in the role of a lifetime. Their clash under the desert heat has become Hollywood lore. The dynamic was tense from the start. Quinn, playing the fierce Bedouin leader Auda Abu Tayi, was already a two-time Oscar winner. He was a dominant force. O'Toole was a relative newcomer, a classically trained stage actor with a reputation for being a bit of a wild card. According to Hollywood stories, Quinn saw O'Toole as inexperienced and too pretty to carry such a massive film. For his part, O'Toole reportedly saw Quinn as an arrogant bully who used brutish force over finesse. It was a fundamental clash between two artistic philosophies. Accounts from the set, though hard to verify, paint a picture of a battlefield of wills. Rumors swirled that Quinn would try to assert his dominance in scenes, while O'Toole would respond with cutting wit and icy resentment. The feud allegedly grew so intense that director David Lean had to act as a referee, often shooting their scenes separately. O'Toole was later said to have told friends that working with Quinn was like trying to perform Hamlet while being heckled by a drunken gladiator. Their explosive on-screen chemistry was undoubtedly fueled by this real-life friction. When they circle each other debating the attack on Aqaba, you're watching two powerful actors in a very real struggle for control. The grueling conditions of the shoot were tough on everyone, but the consistency of the reports points to a genuine animosity. It was a perfect storm, a clash of generations, acting styles, and two fiercely proud men on the pressure cooker set of one of the most ambitious films ever made. After exploring the battles Quinn fought against the system and his peers, we arrive at the final and most formidable rival he ever faced, himself. The greatest war Anthony Quinn ever waged was an internal one, a lifelong struggle against his own insecurities and the relentless ghost of his past. This wasn't a feud that played out on a movie set. It was a battle fought in the quiet of his own mind. In his remarkably candid autobiographies, Quinn revealed a man plagued by inner turmoil. The powerhouse persona the world saw on screen was often a mask for a man deeply at odds with himself. The conflict started in his childhood. Growing up a poor Mexican-American in Los Angeles, he was forever an outsider. He felt too Mexican for Hollywood, yet his Irish surname made him feel not quite Mexican enough in his own community. This struggle with identity haunted him. He felt he was in a constant state of defiance, always having to be louder and tougher than everyone else. Just to be seen, this inner conflict often exploded outwards. He was known for his legendary rages. One story tells of him destroying a dressing room, storming onto the set and yelling, "If they treat me like an animal, I'll behave like an animal." This wasn't just a diva tantrum. It was the roar of a man who felt constantly disrespected. His ambition was a double-edged sword that drove him to success, but left him feeling empty and terrified of failure. In a moment of profound self-awareness, Quinn admitted he couldn't have played his most famous role, Zorba the Greek, before he went through years of psychoanalysis. Zorba has a message, he explained. He tells us, don't be afraid of failure. I was terrified of failure. Before he could become that life-affirming spirit, he had to confront the fear that had ruled him for decades. The story of Anthony Quinn's rivalries is incomplete without this central conflict. The battles with Cohn, Brando, and others were, in many ways, just external projections of his internal war. He was a man who, despite winning 2 Oscars and achieving global fame, always carried the heart of that scrappy kid from Chihuahua who had to fight for everything he ever got. So, when we look back at the towering figure of Anthony Quinn, we see more than just monumental performances. The sensational idea of a hate list fades away, replaced by a more profound truth. Anthony Quinn was a man in a state of perpetual struggle. His journey was a testament to the pressures of an era when egos were as big as the epics they starred in, and when a man like Quinn had to fight a system that tried to define him by his ethnicity. His rivalries with the studio machine, with method actors like Brando, with theatrical royalty like Olivier, and with firebrands like O'Toole weren't just petty squabbles. They were defining battles over art, identity, and respect. These conflicts reveal a side of old Hollywood often lost behind the glamour. But most of all, they reveal the complex heart of Anthony Quinn, a man who could be volatile and difficult, yet brought deep dignity to his roles. A man who wrestled with his own demons, yet gave the world a character like Zorba, an immortal symbol of joy. The ultimate legacy of Anthony Quinn isn't one of hatred, but of struggle. It's the story of an outsider who fought everyone, including himself, to carve out a place in history that was uniquely and uncompromisingly his own.